Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. Hope you're having a great week. Just a quick reminder, we're in the middle of my book launch, so The Beginner's Guide to Pageantry. If you want to take part, it's not too late. Just head to secretpageantbook.com. You'll get early access to the book, access to our private Facebook group where I'm doing daily lives on the chapters and why I wrote them and what my thoughts were when I was writing them. So head over there, secretpageantbook.com. But let's get into the meat of this week's video, which is I want to share some of the experiences that I've been having behind the scenes so there was a particular post that I posted on Instagram, which many of you probably have seen, and that was discussing the big four in pageantry. This is something that when I first entered the world of pageantry almost 10 years ago, I had no idea what it was. There was an Australian title holder who said, "Oh, you should interview more title holders from the big four." And I was like, what's the big four? Is it like Big Ben or, the big banana or something? Which is a thing in Australia, by the way. It's literally a giant banana that people take photos in front of. It's not a real banana. Anyway, it's like 30 feet long or something. And I put, so if you don't know, the big four is universe, world, Earth, and international. Those are considered the big four pageants. Now, it's a very, who decided that's a big four? Is that really the big four? Should it be a big five? Should it be a big six? I don't know. Who cares, really, at the end of the day? But I don't often post up about, international pageantry because, frankly, I don't have much of an interest in it. I'm very specific about the types of pageants that I'm interested in, the sort of women that I want to promote and interview. And international pageantry it's not my cup of tea. And I think this post will explain why. Now, what happens whenever you post about something to do with international pageants and you begin mentioning things like, Miss Earth, Miss International, you get all these comments beginning to come in from the pageant fandom. And this is why I always say I'm not a pageant fan, because I don't act the way that these people, a lot of them, act, and I don't condone the way they act. I'm a fan of some of the women who compete in pageantry, and I'm a huge fan and proponent of a certain aspect of pageantry, but that aspect is very clearly the one that actually does empower or encourages further education or encourages actual advocacy rather than performative advocacy. The walk and the pretty gowns and stuff, to me, it's all very ancillary. To me, it's like, great, you got a great gown and you felt great on stage, great. But that ain't going to change the world. I hate to break it to some of these pageant fans. I actually think some of them think that looking pretty on a stage is going to somehow change the world. And what happened on this post about the big four, there are so many, and you might not see them because I've hidden them because I can't stand these comments. It's like people slagging off one pageant and saying, "Oh, this director is toxic," or "This pageant is not relevant," or "This pageant, it was decided by the news that this is the big four." And it's a sort of inane comments that drive me, that don't they don't serve any purpose other than these people who focus on this sort of which pageant is best, and this one and that one. And to give you context, the reason it drives me crazy is because if you bear in mind the number of people I've interviewed, and at this stage it's north of 350, and I've interviewed contestants from the US, UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway. At this point, it would be hard to point to a country that I haven't interviewed someone from. But when the cameras go off, so to speak, I often have a conversation that's just as long as the interview with that person. Very often, the conversation after the camera goes off is longer. And that's where I get to, you can imagine, I get to hear the things that to this day, still can't really be said in public. They're still a bit taboo. And, you'll look at these comments. I'll look at these comments underneath the post about the big four. And there'll be some account that has no profile picture, or a generic profile picture that's not of them, that has never posted a post in their life, that has no followers. It literally looks like an account that has been created to troll other people. and they'll say, oh, and they'll address this to me or to someone else who's left. I remember someone left a comment saying, I'd love to see, basically saying, I'd love to see Miss America mentioned as one of the big ones, because I feel that's the OG pageant. And, you can understand that. And I have interviewed quite a few contestants from Miss America, and I love the idea behind it, Miss America, because it's one of the scholarship pageants, and I really have fallen in love with the whole idea of scholarship pageants. But then there was some other, pageant expert or pageant critic or whatever you want to call yourself. And they were like, oh, Miss America is not an international pageant. It doesn't count. You should know better. And this is where, and again, I've hidden that comment because a number of people who, and to be fair, a lot of them have come from pageant countries. So you think, I don't want to mention any of them by name because I don't want to get further hate. But you can imagine they're probably not from, I don't think mainly they're from America or Australia or the UK. And there's just this buzz of people who love going onto posts like a post about the Big Four and arguing about, oh, this pageant is better than that pageant, and that pageant is toxic, and that director is toxic. And look, you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't want that sort of discussion on my social media. And I remember distinctly one person saying, oh, you shouldn't go into this pageant because it's toxic. The only one that's relevant now is this new pageant. Now, I'm not going to mention it by name. I don't want to be sued. But this new pageant, to give you an idea, I have had a couple of friends compete in it. And the first one who came back said it was the worst experience of her life. She had competed in Miss World previously. And she said when she went to Miss World, she felt like pretty much all the girls she could be friends with. When she went to this apparently relevant pageant, she found that she couldn't be friends with probably any of them, that it was all very shallow, surface, and toxic. That was one person who competed there 1 year. The next year, I had another friend who competed there. She came back and she said she had been traumatized by this pageant. And this is a pageant that's apparently relevant, and no one should compete in any other pageant except this pageant. And this is why I say I'm not a pageant fan, because having interviewed the people that I have and having spoken to so many people, you kind of become, and I don't like this, but you talk about pageant tea, the gossip, I've heard all of it. And I hope that I've impressed upon you by now that I have no time for gossip. But I do like having my ear to the ground so that when someone who has a session with me or someone who's a close friend to me says, hey, what have you heard about this system? Guess what? I like to be able to point them in the right direction. There have been occasions where, someone will come to me super excited about competing in a particular pageant because they've read all the media about it. They looked at the website and they get excited because, oh, this is a perfect pageant for me. And then I have to tell them, yeah, that's what it says on the website. But last year, they were almost sued by all the previous year's contestants because they had spent the interview rather than interviewing them, haggling and basically berating them to give them money because they'd run out of money because one of the major sponsors had fallen through. One of the girls got a major sponsor on board. One of the promises with that major sponsor was that they would have their name featured in the pageant program, and that pageant program didn't materialize until 3 months after the pageant. And so when I say I'm not a pageant fan, this is why. It's because there's a lot that happens in pageants that I'm not a fan of. And I'm very specific as to, especially after having done this for almost 10 years, there are very specific things that I love about pageantry. And then the rest I really could happily leave behind. But the reason I'm sending this to you, I think it's really important that you get super clear. This is why we talk about knowing your pageant why. It's super important that you get very clear on what it is you do want from your pageant journey and what you don't want. And even go further than that. If you make, let's say, a list of 5 to 10 things that you do want and 5 to 10 things that you don't want, circle the ones that for you are absolute musts. Not the kind of, it'd be better if, but the ones that are absolute musts. And for me, like going over there, I need a pageant system to have integrity. So for example, if you say the biggest part of your pageant is your advocacy project, and then when it comes to interview, you tell the contestants, oh, don't tell us about your advocacy project, we don't have time. And by the way, none of this is hypothetical. This is all things that I've been told firsthand by people who've competed. Because again, I've just spoken to that many people. I'm not going to recommend to anyone that they enter a system like that. So I think of things like having integrity, very specifically, if you say a certain thing is important, that it actually is important. If I was going to enter a pageant, I would want the scoring criteria beforehand, like how much is each component worth. I would also, this is my preference, I would like to be able to get my scores back after the pageant, and no, I shouldn't have to pay for that. I think that's a really good idea. I think it helps keep the judges honest. I've been on judging panels where I've sat next to people who were absolute horrible human beings to like 5 or 6 year olds, just because she was on a power trip. So I think that would help keep the judges honest. Now, I know that's probably a hot take. The directors and judges go, oh my God, can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? If you really believe your judges have integrity and know what they're doing, you should be happy to share how you scored them and why you scored them. And by the way, I think very often there should be more time between contestants walking on stage, so the judges have more time to actually accurately judge. There's a lot that I have to say about how to judge more accurately. But make a list of what exactly it is you want and what it is you don't want. And then that will help you filter out the noise that very often comes with pageantry. If you're in America and you compete in America-centric systems, or whatever country you're in, and you just compete in, I don't mean just in a derogatory term, I mean, if you compete in your system and it's not subject to the crazy pageant fandom with their hot picks and stuff, then this will be a lot easier for you. But if you are in Australia, or you're in New Zealand, or you're in Canada, and you're in the UK, or you're in the US, and you enter one of these pageants that's international, and then when you compete, you enter into the crazy world of pageant hot picks. I have so many things to say about pageant hot picks. It can get really noisy, and it could get really bad for your mental health. And so it's very important that you know what it is you want and what it is you don't want, because when you're looking at something that is maybe distressing you, or you don't like, you can literally look at it and go, well, you do what you want to do, but I don't care about that. And the example I will give with that is pageant hot picks. Now, I'll just go into this briefly. This probably is a topic for another day. Number one, I believe pageant fans should be allowed to do whatever they want to do. It's a free world. If you want to do pageant hot picks, have at it. Here's my problem with them. I've interviewed amazing contestants from countries that aren't pageant powerhouses, and because of that, they hardly ever get picked up by these pageant hot picks. Now, what will happen is that, again, I have no problem with the pageant fan pages doing pageant hot picks. What I hate with every bone in my body is how pageant contestants share the hot picks. Because here's what happens, right? People who never get picked up as a pageant hot pick, who are actually doing the advocacy, doing the real work, and doing everything that they should be doing, never get seen by anybody. And then at the same time, because they're probably following their fellow contestants from other countries, they're seeing this person who, let's say, isn't doing any of that stuff, has 10 or 20 people following her around, doing her social media, has a videography team doing all this. And here this poor girl is from a country that isn't a pageant powerhouse, who's trying to do everything by herself, maybe with one or two person, or it's her boyfriend or her partner who's videoing her, or she's having to do selfies, and she feels like she's going completely ignored. Now, you tell me if you think that's going to be good for her mental health or bad for her mental health. And look, if the answer is, yeah, that's probably not good for her mental health, then if you're one of these people who proclaims, as many of these pageant fan pages love to do, it's like, oh, mental health, oh, empowerment, then why are you doing something that's going to make someone feel ignored? And again, you do you, but this is why I don't do pageant hot picks, because I've interviewed girls that come from countries where they continually feel like they're ignored. And me doing here's the thing, even though I do hour-long or 2-hour-long interviews with contestants, I still don't feel right saying, oh, I think she should win. Because I haven't, guess what? An hour or two is not really enough to get to know someone. And further than that, I haven't interviewed all the other contestants. Maybe if I'd interviewed every single contestant and spent a day with them, maybe then I would say, okay, this is a hot pick. I mean, and look, I have my own personal opinions. It's like, yeah, this one, maybe not that one, but that's just an opinion. I'm not going to put it on my page and have people sharing it. But here's the thing. If you're a contestant, please stop sharing it, because it's a distraction. It's feeding your ego. Like, why are you sharing? And by the way, I think pageants should make it very clear that the hot picks are completely irrelevant. They should specifically state that. If social media is going to be part of the judging criteria, they should get ultra clear as to these are the parts that we're going to consider. Is it following number? Is it engagement number? Right? If you're actually going to look at hot picks, you should state it clearly. Yes, we're going to look at hot picks. No one does. Not to my knowledge anyway. And so it becomes this grey area where it's like, oh, if I'm not getting picked up by pageant hot picks, then that's going to hurt my chances of winning. So every time I'm mentioned by someone, I'm going to share it on my page, and becomes this sort of, it's like this hand in glove sort of thing. It's like, oh, you post me as a hot pick and I'll share it on my story. And it's this very, it's sycophancy, right? This whole sort of sucking up to people, and I can't stand it. And I will give you this counterexample in case you think I'm being too on the nose with this. And I understand if you think I'm taking this too seriously, have at it. But I'll come back to professional sports, right? And for me, it's tennis. You might pick a certain professional player as your favorite to win a tournament. At the moment, the US Open is on in New York, in Flushing Meadows. I 100% guarantee you, if you tag a professional player as your pick to win the tournament, there is no chance that they're going to share it on their social media. Why? Because it's a distraction, because it's irrelevant. You're allowed to pick your favorite, and you're allowed to thank your fan base, but thank your fan base. Don't keep looking at who's tagging you and what and become obsessed with who's picking you as a hot pick. The other thing I will say, these people who pick you as hot picks, they don't know you. What are they basing their hot pick on? Your photo. And you say, oh no, they know about their bio. Really? You think you're going to know someone from the 3 or 4 paragraphs they put underneath a professionally produced headshot? No, you don't. And so let's be honest about this. They're picking you as a hot pick because of how pretty you are. That's why I think it's so antithetical to what I'm about in pageantry, which is the actual empowerment part, the learning the skills, the learning how to, the walk. I don't really think it has that much of a transitional effect from pageant life to real life, but the interview skills, learning how to present yourself with confidence, that sort of stuff, it's completely derailed by these pageant hot picks. I mean, they might like to think, oh, but she's studying a doctorate in this, she's studying a bachelor in that. That's just a label. It doesn't mean anything. And there are people who don't have formal degrees who have amazing life stories. Those two are completely different things. And so, again, at the end of the day, this is why I will say, I'll say to the day I die, I'm not a pageant fan. I'm a fan of certain of the women who are competing and a fan of certain aspects. But for you, this is why it's so clear to get clear about your pageant why, and what you do want, what you both do want, and what you don't want from pageants, so you can filter out some of the noise. So I hope this makes sense. Let me know your thoughts, and I will speak to you next week.